Welcome to episode 32 of the Carnism Debunked podcast. Today's guest is Natalie Fulton, an animal rights YouTuber who has made radio appearances recently regarding her work with organisation Pro Animal Future. In this episode, we're going to discuss Natalie's recent work, the power of system change versus individual change, and of course some political stuff in relation to animal rights to see where we agree and disagree. So Natalie, welcome to the show, and it's great to finally talk with you. I know we speak a lot on social media and stuff and on YouTube, but it's great to actually have you in the room with me now. I think we're going to have a really good chat.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, I'm excited about it.
So one of the reasons I wanted to get you on is to talk about the kind of stuff that you do, because I think it creates a lot of discussion in the animal rights movement, stuff about system change and individual change and stuff like that. And some people might be listening now thinking like, what the hell does George mean? So we can expand on this in a bit, but tell everyone about the kind of work that you do in animal rights, and then we can go into that.
Sure. Well, before we talk about what I'm doing now, I'd like to back up to when I first got into animal rights, which was during the pandemic. And I initially went vegan because I saw street outreach videos. So, in my mind, street outreach was the best way to advocate for animals because it turned me vegan and a bunch of other people that I knew. So, I started hitting the streets pretty hard and then uploading the videos to YouTube and did that for a couple of years. And then I saw this research study that came out from this organization called Pax Fauna. And it basically said that the individual consumer change messaging was not landing with meat eaters because it puts people into this box of consumer, and they behave very differently when they're consumers compared to when they're thinking of themselves as citizens, when they care more about the public good and doing the right thing. When we're consumers, we're just kind of trying to get the best deal, it becomes very selfish. So that's when my advocacy started to shift. I ended up getting a job with Pro Animal Future, which is Pax Fauna. Pax Fauna is our research organization, and the Pro Animal Future is applying the research in the real world. So that's what I'm doing now. It's mostly political advocacy. We run ballot measures, which are a unique thing here in the US, and I basically just make the silly videos for them. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, tell me more about who Pax Fauna are, because I'd heard you mention them in a YouTube video before, and I think I actually wrote in the comments section what was the name of that organization that you mentioned at 15 minutes 11 or whatever the hell it was. So yeah, go into more detail about what Pax Fauna is and what it does.
Sure. So Pax Fauna started the research that Pro Animal Future has come out of. So it's not really as much of a thing anymore. Like when you work for Pro Animal Future, it's still Pax Fauna, but it's pretty much all Pro Animal Future right now. But the research that we did before was all done through Pax Fauna. So they're basically our 501c3, and then Pro Animal Future is a 501c4. So it's two different types of nonprofits, like depending on donations and whatnot. But yeah, basically, it was a research organization that came out of activists from DXE who were becoming disillusioned with the animal rights movement and thinking that we weren't having the impact that we could have. So they had a hypothesis about why this messaging wasn't landing with meat eaters, and then started the organization to do the research to find out for sure.
And I see you've become quite the face of Pro Animal Future in many ways. They're putting you on the radio stations and everything. Talk to us about your radio appearances with them.
Yeah, it was wild. So whenever I did activism on my own, no one cared. I never got on the media or the radio. They just ignored me. But as soon as we started running these ballot measures, we became the hottest local issue in Denver politics, as well as the most expensive because the meat industry spent $2.5 million against our campaigns. So it ignited this huge debate in the city. So all the news outlets wanted to talk to us about our measures. And luckily, I had spent 3 or 4 years debating meat eaters. So I had the debate chops. So I went on a couple radio shows. One was against this libertarian, another was this conservative woman. And I did pretty well, I think. And by the end of both interviews, they still disagreed with me, but I could tell that they respected me. And the first guy, his name was Ross, he invited me on, and I think he wanted me to completely mess up and do a bad job. And he was really nice to me when I was there. He was showing me around. I brought donuts. He was happy. Then, as soon as I got home, he had sent me a bunch of emails about how I was lying and spreading misinformation. And I sent him the sources for everything I said, and he continually dismissed it. So I think that the slaughterhouse owner actually called him and was pretty pissed off about it because he also had connections to people working on the opposition. So I showed him, but unfortunately, he was pretty mean after that.
Yeah, it's a real shame the kind of ignorance that we deal with on these kind of radio stations and on TV shows and stuff, and all these kind of talking heads that the meat and dairy industry essentially have for them. And it sounds like this guy is one of those people. And yeah, I do think you did very well on those radio appearances. But one question I would have is the way in which you answered questions on them. You seem to have answered them in quite a kind of carefully worded way, in that you maybe, and this is probably going to go into what I mentioned earlier. There was almost this avoidance I felt of talking about the individual, the consumer, and it was more about the system, the corporations, how powerful these slaughterhouses are. Talk to me about the psychology of that, and maybe you even disagree, but do you agree with me first of all? And talk to me about the psychology of that, if you do agree that you maybe spoke in that kind of way on those shows.
I definitely spoke in that kind of way. When I was there, I wasn't representing Natalie Fulton, vegan activists. I was there representing
Right.
Pro Animal Future, which is not a vegan organization. We don't require people to be vegan to help us. We want to bring animal rights into the mainstream, and we can't do that with only 3% of the population. We're trying to win elections, and you need at least like over 50% of the vote for initiatives to pass. So if we only ran stuff that would appeal just to vegans, then we wouldn't win. Maybe we'd win in, 40 years, but not right now. So what we're trying to do is create a broader appeal. And I think a really great example of this is Prop 12 in California. Do you know what that one is?
Something about ag laws, maybe? Is that it?
No, it's about cage-free eggs and banning gestation crates in pork
Oh, yeah.
production.
Yeah.
Yeah, so huge ballot measure. And if you looked at the time, what percentage of consumers are buying cage-free eggs over caged eggs? It was a very, very small percentage. I don't remember the exact number, but it was less than 10%. So their consumption was showing that they didn't want cage-free eggs. But then when they got to the ballot box and they voted, over 60% of people voted to ban caged egg production. So we're able to get a much broader network of public support by shifting out of the consumer frame. So that's why I was specifically not talking about it.
Okay, so this this obviously throws up many questions. So if there's the case that there's this misalignment with what the public says and what the public actually does, why focus on the system when we should focus on them? Because that's, you would agree that that's hypocrisy, right? Like, so the public are saying, yeah, we should totally ban factory farms. Oh my god, yeah, caged eggs, oh disgusting, yeah, ban them. And then they go to the shop and they just buy that crap. So why wouldn't you focus on them if that is what they're, if that's the kind of hypocrisy that's happening around us in society?
Sure. So I think if we did try to focus on them, I'm not sure what the population of California is. I know it's like a fifth of people in the US, so pretty
Mm.
high. If we were to try to convince all of those individual consumers to buy the cage-free eggs, that would take way more time and capacity than the animal rights movement has. Whereas if we run ballot initiatives, we can get the same results faster in a way that the public actually does support. And then we get media attention. We kind of push the issue into the political landscape, where is, that's where we see real change in society anyway. So I think there's a few reasons, but the number one would just be it's completely impractical to try to change everyone when you can just run a measure and have the benefit um, quicker.
But obviously, you're someone who's taken on individual change yourself as a vegan. So
Mm.
do you still so you obviously do know the importance of that. So do you still do activism that is based on changing the individual? Because that's, I mean, both you and I are vegan. We're not doing this hypocritical stuff that people are doing. We're not funding animal agriculture at all. So never mind cage free, never mind gestation crate free. You and I are vegans. We don't fund any kind of animal abuse. So, is there still room in your life at the moment for that individual change activism, or are you still just focused fully on system change stuff?
Yeah, I think that a lot of times when people hear that I mostly focus on system change, they're like, oh, well, why don't you care about individuals anymore? And that's
Mm.
certainly not what I'm saying. I still do street outreach sometimes. It's not a priority for me right now, but I'll still do it like with different organizations. And I find value in it, especially because I think one of the biggest benefits of street outreach isn't the chance that the person you're talking to is going to go vegan, because I think that's a very low chance. But it's
Mm.
making you a better advocate. You're able to deal with people being mean to you. You're able to speak well about animal rights. And then when you do move into those bigger stages, you're a lot more prepared, right? Like if I had gone on those radio interviews without having talked to people about veganism, I would have been terrible. So I think it's great for us to sharpen our skills and making videos where we can reach people with that messaging. Maybe the person you're talking to won't go vegan, but someone who watches the video will. All of that
Mm.
stuff is definitely valuable. But we could also get into subsidies and how in the US, it's not like I don't want to be like, oh, quitting dairy doesn't make a difference, because I think everything does signal market demand. And the point of being vegan, in my mind, is to change culture and to show people around you that what we're doing to animals is completely unacceptable. But the average dairy farm in the US gets 73% of their revenue from the government anyway. So by opting out of that system, it's still not really having a huge impact on the supply and demand side. So I think arguing with the supply and demand side of veganism is fairly easy to do just because of these subsidies. So that's why I come at it more from a cultural anti-exploitation lens.
Yeah, it is kind of doomer in a way to think about the fact that it's not fully just supply and demand. Like me and you going vegan alone doesn't completely 100% cut everything out, because you and I still have to pay tax, and there are huge subsidies involved with these corporations. So is that part of then what you're saying is that attacking subsidies might be one of the main ways in which we see the downfall of animal agriculture?
I think it's certainly promising. I don't really know too many people working on that specifically, but I would love to see more of it. I don't, we have talked about running some sort of initiatives where we could attack subsidies more directly. Yeah, I think it would be great. In the US, only 4% of food subsidies go toward plant foods for human consumption. That's
Mm.
absolutely insane. Like, we know these are the healthiest foods. We know that they require much less land and water, and we're squandering billions of dollars on this highly inefficient food system. It's absolutely ridiculous. So I do think attacking that would have huge benefits. And kind of going back to the consumer thing, when people behave as consumers, they really are often looking for the best deal. Price has an outsized impact on consumer behavior. So if we can change the prices of things, then that'll have a bigger effect.
Do you think that the consumer, the average non-vegan, is bullshitting when they get polled about this stuff on the streets and they say, do you support a ban on this, or do you support, because let me give you an example. Humane Hancock, you know who that is.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
he often cites this study that I think was done in the UK, which is that the overwhelming majority of the public or something supports a ban on slaughterhouses. Now, do you just think they're saying that to virtue signal while they're being asked the poll? Because let's think about it. If the UK government was to ban slaughterhouses tomorrow and their precious bacon is no longer on the shelves, I reckon there'd be riots across the UK. I don't know if, or are you of the more kind of less cynical mindset than me, and you think actually, no, probably the reason people are buying bacon and eggs and stuff is because it's there, because the system just allows it. And if the government did take it away, maybe they would just be like, yeah.
Sure. So the study that he's talking about actually comes from the US, and I
Okay.
believe it was originally done by an animal rights group. I think it was Sentient Institute, and they got those numbers. It was actually, I don't think it was 50% for slaughterhouse. It was 47% would vote to
Right.
ban slaughterhouses. And then the meat industry saw that study and they said, that's absolutely insane. We're going to replicate it. So they did it at some big ag school in the US and they got the same results. And they were like, what is going on? So that was actually our first campaign in Denver last year, was to ban slaughterhouses, because we wanted to test that study to see if these results had any validity or if people were just bullshitting, like you said.
Mm.
And we found that when we ran a slaughterhouse ban, 35% of people voted to ban slaughterhouses, which is way higher than you would expect, considering there's only 3% are vegan or vegetarian. So we do increase our public support a lot by banning slaughterhouses compared to trying to get people to go vegan. But it's certainly, I mean, I think you're right that there would be riots in the street. And once people, like, a lot of people don't even think that meat has to come from slaughterhouses. Like, they just don't even know where it comes from. But when you explain to them that without slaughterhouses, meat could not exist, then that public support does go down quite a lot.
Are you saying there's a significant number of people who don't realize that animals have to be slaughtered?
Maybe they know animals have to be slaughtered, but they don't think that they're slaughtered in slaughterhouses. They think the farmer sings the animals to sleep or something. Like, they just have no idea. And I was talking to a bunch of voters in Denver during the slaughterhouse ban. And yeah, legitimately, they did not know that every animal has to go through a slaughterhouse, especially an industrial slaughterhouse, which is what we were trying to shut down.
So what do they think happens? Did you manage to pull it out of them?
Not really. I mean, I think a lot of them think that the meat industry uses euthanasia or some sort of painless method. If when people talk about halal, they're like, "Oh, the animal doesn't feel pain." So I think the issue isn't that they think something different is happening; it's that they don't think about it at all.
Yeah. Is that the reputation with halal in the States, or is that just among Muslims? Because I hear Muslims romanticize halal a lot in the UK, but the UK public in general, the non-Muslim public, they really hate halal and they think it's like, I mean, it is awful, but they say it's so much more awful than like the gas chambers and all the stuff that they fund with like the pig industry and stuff like that. There's this real kind of hatred for halal in the UK, unless you're talking to a Muslim on street outreach. And just like anyone else, they have this kind of delusional take that, like you say, the way they do it, the animal feels nothing and it's humane or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's completely different in the US, maybe because we have fewer Muslim immigrants, so it's just not an issue that's top of mind for us. The slaughterhouse we were trying to shut down was a halal slaughterhouse, so we were constantly hit with, "Oh, it's halal," from non-Muslims, of course. And we were like, "Well,
What?
we have video evidence of them violating halal protocol. Isn't that bad?" And they just don't even care. So, yes, people do think halal slaughter is much better here in the US.
That's crazy. So in the UK, what the common thing is, if vegans protest outside a slaughterhouse, say a pig slaughterhouse or something, you get a bunch of people say, why don't you lot protest the halal slaughterhouses instead, where the animals really suffer and stuff? So it's like the other way around.
Yeah, and here, if we protest the halal slaughterhouses, then we're racist. So, there's also
Yeah,
that.
it's one of those catch-22 things. The racist thing. That's a nice segue actually to the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, because you did a video recently with maybe an inflammatory thumbnail, because it had Joe Rogan in it, and I'm not defending Joe Rogan's views on animals at all here. And he had this cowboy dude on his show, whatever,
Taylor
and
Sheridan.
right, the guy from Yellowstone or something.
Yeah.
Um, but you use maybe inflammatory language in that in that YouTube video. It said the rise of anti-vegan fascism. Now,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what did you mean by that?
Yeah, people really got pissed off at me for saying fascist, but I think it's pretty easy to look clearly at what's happening in the US and see that fascism is rising. And when you say fascism, people are like, oh, are you saying that they're Nazis? And I'm not saying that these people are Nazis, but I do think that the years before, it was completely Nazi Germany looked different to the full-blown fascism, and there are signs that point toward fascism forming, and we're experiencing about all of them here in the US right now. And it's definitely concerning. Anytime there's democracy, there's the threat of fascism. So I think it's just smart to recognize the signs and be aware of them and to try to push back against it when you can. And I think that Joe Rogan helping elect a president who has said specifically that he wants to run a third term, that he thinks he won an election, that the numbers don't support that. We can disagree on that or whatever, but Trump definitely does want ultimate power. So Joe helping elect him, I do think, doesn't mean he's a fascist, but that he could help fascism take over in the US.
Yeah, obviously I can't say that I would agree with you on there, but what is it about? Because look at the thing I'd say about Rogan is that I think over the past few years he's actually been quite monumental in anti-fascist rhetoric. He's wanted small government, freedom of speech. But I don't know about this dude, the cowboy rancher dude, but is it so? It's your position then that Joe Rogan himself is not actually a fascist, but he might be just kind of emboldening the pathway to that somehow.
I don't know enough about Joe Rogan's political views lately to really say if he is or is not a fascist, but yeah, he's definitely emboldening them. And one thing fascist leaders do is they'll say they're in favor of something, but they're not actually in favor of it, right? So just because he says he supports small government doesn't mean that's necessarily true. For Joe, it probably is, but a lot of fascist leaders say stuff like that and then completely go against that. They say they care about the working class. They don't really care about the working class. So I don't think just what he says is a good way to measure whether or not he is or isn't a fascist.
But why not just take people for what they say? Is that not a very kind of cynical, like accusatory viewpoint? You're kind of like saying, "Oh, but this is what you really mean, Joe. Come on."
Yeah, I mean, I think that we should look through history and see what people say when they're trying to take power and how they completely go against that when they're in power. So not taking them at face value is just smart. With Trump, oh, I care about the working class. I'm gonna, cut taxes for poor people. He's doing the exact opposite of that, and he's not helping the working class. So I think believing what he had said was misguided. Like maybe someone that you're just having a conversation with, sure, take them at face value, but someone who's trying to get into a position of power, we should really look at their actions.
Did you see the Biden administration engaging in any kind of fascist behavior in the US? I mean, I certainly did, and I can tell you my observations, but I'm just wondering if you spotted anything yourself there with the Biden admin doing anything like that.
I don't support the Biden administration. And I think a lot of times when I call out the right, people are like, oh, you just support Democrats, which
Mm.
certainly isn't the case. We had many issues with the Democrats in Denver specifically. And I'm very critical of the Democratic Party here in the US as well. I'm sure there's some fascist stuff that they're doing too, because, fascism isn't necessarily neatly divided among on political lines. It's really just
Mm.
something that tries to attack democracy however it can. But yeah, I'm curious
Yes.
what you thought Biden was doing that was specifically fascist.
Did you see? It's ironic that I'm actually gonna. This is why I disagree with maybe your interpretation of Rogan as emboldening fascism, because I think Rogan has actually. I think his show has actually done a lot to kind of expose fascistic elements of US governments and various kind of governments and things going on around the world. But one of the things that the Biden administration did, which is in my eyes just 100% fascism, was did you see the Rogan episode when they had Mark Zuckerberg on?
I saw clips of it. I didn't watch the whole thing, no.
Well, it's hard for people to believe that this even happened and just how dystopian this is. But the Biden administration, Zuckerberg attested that the Biden administration were ringing up Facebook, screaming at them down at the phone, calling their employees names and stuff, telling them to censor memes about COVID, like censoring like humor posts. And Zuckerberg was like, look, we're not going to do that. Like we have certain protocols in place to not allow, misinformation and stuff like that. But you can't, as the US government, call us up and tell us you're going to take action against us if we don't take down humor or jokes about you as the government or criticism of your policy on COVID. I don't know if
Yeah.
you're aware of that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that um, you know, I do think free speech is a tough topic. Like I'm
Hmm.
pretty free speech to a point where most people might disagree with me.
Hmm.
But I also think that, Elon Musk would say, right, that he is pro free speech, and then Twitter, he's definitely controlling the narrative on there quite a lot. Not that Mark Zuckerberg is doing that, but um, yeah. And then we get into the disagreements about vaccines and public health and whether it's justified. I don't think that they should have been calling him and yelling at him, but I do think that there should be some limits on free speech, but I'm not confident in what those limits should be.
Yeah, that is definitely an interesting topic because I'm not a free speech absolutist. So I do believe, for example, slander or a direct call to violence, like a fatwa, like you must kill Salman Rushdie or something like that.
Yeah.
I believe that is the kind of stuff that has to have consequences, has to have action taken against. But I think the dystopian times we've come out of with the super heavy censorship on social media and the quote unquote fact checkers, I do think that was very dystopian, and I think that was a huge the power that big tech has to
Yep.
control the spread of information. I think the fact checkers were, as Zuckerberg has rightly said, in my opinion, very politically biased. And I do think that there were infringements on our free speech, especially that is about the Biden administration screaming at Facebook to take down memes. I mean, that is like,
Yeah,
that
it's
should
it's
worry
pretty
every
ridiculous.
American. Yeah, yeah.
I promise I've been worried about big tech for quite a long time, and it sucks because I'm a social media manager, so I have to use it every
Mm,
day, and I'm like, "Oh my God." They're definitely, and it's also leaves us very vulnerable to attacks from other countries, which has obviously happened with psyops and
mm.
things like that. And the meat industry has really exploited social media and misinformation as well. So yeah, it's definitely a real threat.
And I heard you say in that Rogan vid that you did, I want to see because I think I might disagree with you on this mainly, but I might agree with you to a certain extent. I think you made the point in that video that veganism is political rather than apolitical. Um, tell us about that. Feel free to expand on your argument as much as you want, and I'll see if I have any kind of pushback to your points.
Sure. So veganism has unfortunately entered the culture wars to quite a high level recently. And I've actually been thinking about making a video about this because I'm not sure 100% all of the info. I feel like it's always been a bit political to refuse to eat animals. I know when the suffragettes were really championing the women's right to vote, a lot of them were vegetarians and they were very pro animal rights too. So it makes me think that they were rejecting the idea of meat as masculinity and the patriarchy and ideas like that. But veganism has become much more political in the recent years, as far as I've noticed, with the rise of the carnivore influencers and the far right really, for some reason, getting really interested in raw milk and the anti-seed oil. There's just a lot of this nutrition misinformation that the far right is using as a recruitment tool and to kind of show their their power and dominion over animals and natural hierarchies. But my main arguments about making veganism political is that it's something that we need to do more of. I understand that a lot of vegans are wary of alienating the right or the left, and conservatives can be vegan. And I always get pushback when I talk about how it's, less common for conservative people to be vegan. I'm not saying that conservative vegans don't exist, but whenever we see real big social change in at least the United States, it's always come through politics. And as of right now, animal rights is a fringe issue that most people don't care about. We need to bring it into mainstream politics if we want to have the impact for animals that they deserve.
Yeah, so I think I do largely agree with you on many points there, but we may have one point of contention, but I just want to find out. But so the where I agree with you is that veganism is political only in the same way as that everything is quote unquote political. Any kind of change, any kind of action, any kind of thing, everything that happens in day-to-day life is in some way tied with politics. And you're right, if you want to drive change somehow in a world of law and a legal system and a voter, politics obviously has to play a part in that. So yes, in that sense, I agree with you that veganism is political in that sense. The reason that I've always publicly said for years, though, on social media, that generally veganism is apolitical, and this is, I guess we're talking about in a different sense here, where I draw the distinction, is that it's politically neutral in that it doesn't have a home like on the left or the right or the center or anything like that. I don't think either side, because the common thing I hear from, because I'm a centrist, right? And the common thing I hear from leftist vegans, intersectionals and the like, is that veganism is a left-wing movement. And I've made videos about this, saying my strong rejection to this idea. Do you think I know most vegans do identify as being on the left. Do you think it is a left-wing movement?
Yeah, so I think that if you just want to say, oh, it's apolitical or it's not mostly left wing, I would like to see some evidence for that claim, because there is evidence that it is much more of a progressive left wing position. Number one, a liberal is about 3 times as likely to be vegan than a conservative. Number two, when we did polling when Pro Animal Future did some polling about potential initiatives we should run, and had people say if they're conservative, if they're liberal, how much they support our initiatives. I mean, the conservative support was at maybe 25%, whereas the liberal support was like 85%. So I feel that we almost, I mean, when I started doing animal rights and politics, I wanted it to be bipartisan. I wanted people to be able to get behind it no matter where they sat on the political line. And that is what I would want if it were up to me. But unfortunately, that's not really what the data is showing us. It does seem like we're going to have to tie ourselves to the left, at least in the US, if we want to be successful in the same way that gay marriage did. I'm not saying that's ideal. I wish it were different, but that just seems to be what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, this is where I would reach the opposite conclusion from you. So,
Okay.
yeah, leftists are more likely to go vegan. There's obviously something blocking then right-wing people from going vegan. So what we need to do, in my opinion, is decouple veganism from the left. We have to destroy this idea that it's a leftist movement. Otherwise, we're not going to get right-wingers on board.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we had unlimited time and maybe animals weren't tortured by the billions every second, I think I think we'll have more success faster if we just try to increase our left support rather than trying to decrease our left support to try to get more right wing support. I just don't see that happening. The right also
Oh,
has such strong ideas of meat and masculinity, and they already have the meat industry is already so tied to their identity. I feel like it would take a very long time to undo that. So yeah, I think it'd be a lot quicker to go the other route.
well, what I'm saying to do is not to push leftist people away from veganism. I think we need to advance it in a theory neutral way that ties in with values of both the left and the right. We can play on the whole if there's this whole masculinity idea on the right, this real men eat meat and they own the ranch in Kentucky or wherever it is, and my father was a steer, and he told me, son, you better
Yeah.
not be no soy boy when you grow up, and all this crap that anti-vegans on the right might put out. Okay, why don't we talk about how veganism ties in with those positive ideas of masculinity, protecting the weak, protecting the defenseless? We can draw a link between both the pro-choice side on the left and the pro-life side on the right. We can talk about, with the right-wing Christians, we can talk about, we've got documentaries like Seaspiracy, made by a conservative Christian who's a Bible expert, talk about how a vegan diet was the original diet of man before the fall of man, before sin. This is what God said is the perfect world, the paradise, the Garden of Eden, before humans cocked it all up and we have the sinful world that we do now. Personal responsibility is, I think, a big, because let me tell you my view as a centrist, right? I'm critical about aspects of both the left and the right. One of the things I hate as a centrist is that on the left, everything is always someone else's fault. There's no personal responsibility, in my opinion. Whereas on the right, what I tend to prefer about the right wing with regards to this aspect, is that, if you commit a crime, it's your fault. It's not the system or something. Or if you commit a terror attack, it's your fault. It's not because, X country is being bombed or whatever it is. I think personal responsibility is a huge value that we can drive, that we can link to the right. So what I'm saying is, Natalie, not to push leftists away from it, but we can draw on values from whatever someone's ideology is, whether they're a capitalist, whether they're a communist, if they're a Christian, if they're a Muslim. I just rambled a lot there, but tell me your thoughts on what I'm kind of saying there.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not against trying to increase our support on the right, and obviously there are a lot of things in animal rights that they should agree with based on their values. And that is why I do like how there are conservative vegans who do speak to conservatives well, and I really do value them and appreciate them. And when we run our campaigns in more purple places where like there's a bigger population of conservatives, we're certainly going to do things to try to bring them on board.
Yeah.
I just don't want us to, I want us to stay realistic. Um, and yeah, once I saw those polling numbers for how many conservatives would support a factory farm ban, and it was just like so low compared to the liberals, I was just thinking maybe it's not even a strategy worth pursuing. Like, how much would it increase support? They're also very, very free market, and that's kind of a tough value to fight against. Um, but yeah, I also just disagree with that whole premise of personal responsibility. I love personal responsibility for myself. I don't know if you like stoicism at all, but it's very focused on your actions and what you can control. But one of my favorite quotes is to be strict with yourself and tolerant of others. So, like, yes, I will, you know, lean on personal responsibility for myself, but also recognize that systems are in place that do influence that people act, even as simple as being at the grocery store and things mostly being animal products and that being cheaper. Like, I think that's a system that has really negative impacts. And if we say the system isn't causing people to eat animal products at all, then that would just be a complete delusion. So I think
Which is
that we
why
need some of it.
which is why you can talk to a right winger about how grocery prices skyrocketed under Biden.
Sure. And they're skyrocketed now. So I don't know.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
But here's what, okay. I think, so here's the thing. The reason I think that there's seemingly a lesser receptiveness to veganism on the right than there is on the left is because we're not advocating in the right way to the right. I've seen so many vegans who want to cannibalize our own movement by completely shutting out the right, by just saying that, oh, veganism is not for you. If you have this view on this, get the fuck out. You're not welcome in the movement. Why don't we put, like, if we actually get the right people to advocate it to the right way, to the right wing, then I think we're going to have much higher numbers on the right. And this is anecdotal, but the best piece of activism I ever did, the most successful piece of advocacy that I've ever personally undertaken myself, was speaking to a totally right-wing, like MAGA audience. Do you know who David Nino Rodriguez is?
Mm-mm.
So he's a former professional boxer, and he runs the YouTube channel Nino's Corner. And he's like, you know, a truther, big Trumpster. All his like listeners, watchers, whatever, are big like Christians and very right-leaning. And he got me on his show because a certain person who I will not name, who produced a very famous documentary in the vegan movement, put out this sneering, Natalie, public statement like, "No, I will not go on your racist, anti-science show. Didn't you get the message at the end of my documentary that veganism is about ending all forms of oppression," or something like that? So I got wind of this ridiculous refusal to go on the show and advocate to hundreds of thousands of people. And I said, you know what, fuck it, I'll go on then. And I went on, Natalie, and I talked to Nino about, I think he thought he was in for an easy ride. I thought he thought,
Yeah, they always do.
Right. I think he thought, who's this, guy gonna come on and trying to convince me not to do this? And he was so visibly upset, Natalie, with what I showed him, the footage of the pigs in the gas chambers, the chicks being shredded alive. Oh my God, when I showed him the footage of the calf being taken away from the mother, that really got him. I was watching the live chat. There was all these tears in I'm never eating dairy again. Well, I got messages to my Instagram. Thank you. I'm a fan of Nino's Corner. I will never eat animal products again. Thanks to you. These were all people firmly on the right. I've never had any kind of leftist audience that I've advocated to, like at a university or anything like that, react in the same way.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I would love to see if that holds up, like when people are voting on stuff, if those people actually went vegan. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, who knows?
Yeah.
But I'm not saying people should not speak to audiences who are mostly right wing. And yeah, it's kind of a tough question. Like if you have someone in your animal rights group who has some problematic views in other areas, do you kick them out? Like I would say no. But also it's kind of the same mindset of human supremacy, right? Like if you're saying, oh, humans can do whatever to animals because they're lesser than us, and if you're saying, oh, white people are better than black people, like that's still that supremacist mindset, which I do think is problematic. And I certainly wouldn't want that to be rampant in the animal rights movement, because I do think we should stand against all oppression.
And this is why I think veganism is politically neutral, because each side of the political spectrum believes that the other side is anti-oppression. Believes that their side is anti-oppression. So if we were to take, I don't know, veganism from, we're going to get into the whole intersectionality thing, I guess, in a moment. But let's get into it now.
Let's do it.
So I think one of my problems with intersectionality is that it kind of frames the left as this like objectively anti-oppression thing, and the right as this like pro-oppression thing, and that the left has just the objectively correct answers. They're the moral authority on what oppression is. And there's this kind of Dunning-Kruger effect going on as well, where it's like a lot of the intersectional crowd and the people on the far left within the vegan movement, they're insanely confident about things that they actually know nothing about and could actually be beaten in a debate about, I think, by a competent conservative debater or whoever it is.
Can you give an example?
Sure. I think the average leftist pro-choicer, or
that's what I was thinking, actually, because like I watched pro-choice and pro-life debates, and like the pro-choice people never know what they're getting into. It's hilarious.
And even the gun control stuff. I think a lot of vegans who on the left who support gun control, I think there would actually be, I think they kind of live in like echo chambers. Like I live in the UK, which is super, super, super anti-gun. Guns are just banned. It's just the system we grow up in. We don't have school shootings here or mass shootings. So it's just this kind of like, there's this kind of echo chamber here that, guns are just bad. And damn, those crazy Americans, they have this Second Amendment thing over there and they allow guns and the school shootings happen, blah, blah, blah. But I think the average Brit would actually find it hard to actually step out of that echo chamber, just as the average kind of left-leaning vegan would who supports gun control, to actually have a debate with a skilled right-wing debater on gun control. And I think they'd be surprised that the other side has better points than they considered, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So that's what I guess this is my key problem with intersectionality. It basically thinks that the left has a monopoly on what anti-oppression is. What do you think of that?
I think you're almost conflating intersectionality with the left or left wing, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like that, right? Like when I think about intersectionality, a few years ago, I probably would have been more against it, like, oh, we should only focus on animal rights, and that's going to be more strategic. And I think like what it really comes down to is what's going to win for animals quicker. So the reason I shifted on that and think that we should actually embrace intersectionality is because of the campaign in Denver. And one of the things we didn't do that we should have done was really build more bridges with Hispanic communities, with Black communities and immigrants, and then they could have spoken in support of us. And basically what the opposition did was say like, oh, look, they're all white, and we weren't all white, but we were mostly white, and they just used these identity politics to basically make us look like huge racists for trying to shut down a slaughterhouse where most people who worked there were Hispanic. And obviously it's ridiculous, but it works. And if we had had a bunch of Hispanic organizations with us the whole way, then we could have really countered that better. I also think that, when there is oppression in the world, like we should try to fight against it just because it's the right thing to do. So it's also kind of a moral position for me as well.
Yeah, I think. Did you see my debate with Catherine Klein?
I believe, was Debug Your Brain the moderator?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw part of it whenever it came out. That was a while ago. But yeah, I mean, Catherine Klein also, lived in Denver during the campaign, so I definitely spent some time with her as well. So maybe she's influenced my views.
Yeah, and look, I don't want to kind of I don't want to rib on Catherine Klein too much for her because she's a respectful person, and I think we have good dialogue together about stuff that we disagree on. So I really appreciate that about her. But I do think what she did in that debate is an example of the left being overconfident about their own competence to analyze what is oppression and what is not. And I think, I mean, I agree with you. I want oppression to be eliminated from the world. But the thing is, every single person is oppressive to someone else. This is why I just hate intersectionality. So every single person that has views that are deemed to be bigoted, discriminatory, evil, oppressive, backwards to another person. So even this is
Can you
why I
give
go.
examples?
Okay, what's your position on gun control?
Oof, I'm gonna out myself as I'm pretty pro gun, honestly.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay, well,
yeah.
there's an example.
Okay. So I think that we need to be able to protect ourselves. We need to be able to learn how to use them. I am not great at shooting a gun. My husband has gotten a few. He's learned how to shoot. I think that it could get very violent in the US pretty soon. And the other problem, and I know you're going to disagree with me on this one, is that the gun control laws, if we did enact them, could disproportionately harm minorities because they would get refused gun ownership much more often than white people. So it would end up being a much more racist system where a bunch of white people have guns and minorities don't.
So here's the funny thing. Either position you said on that, and by the way, this is groundbreaking episode of the Carnage and Debunked podcast. Natalie Fulton from Pro Animal Future is pro gun. Who the fuck would have thought this? And this is a great example. I actually thought you were going to be anti-gun, right? And I was going to say, okay, so, someone might say, oh, Natalie Fulton wants to disarm women who want to protect themselves from their rapist or whatever, walking home at night. So that was one example I'm going to give. You threw me off. You've gone the other way, which is fine. You said, I'm pro-gun. Okay, so now millions of people think, Natalie, that you're this lunatic who wants people to be able to shoot up fucking schools or something.
Let me just clarify that being pro-gun in the US is probably pretty different than being pro-gun in the UK. I feel like it would be a much more extreme position there than it is here. There are quite a few people, especially in the animal rights movement, that are pro-gun as well.
Yeah. But this is a fantastic example. So here's the thing. This is what, so the average intersectional is going to disagree with you vehemently on this. They massively are against the Second Amendment.
Not necessarily, not based on the people that I know.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen pretty much everyone that I've seen on the left in the vegan movement is anti-gun. So this is just one example.
Yeah, I think that that's also partly because it's such a non-violent movement, and we are so sensitive to violence against animals, so certainly more toward humans. So that could be specifically vegan intersectionalists as well.
There's another thing I wanted to mention as well. Okay, the right makes all these ridiculous anti-vegan arguments. Okay, they have this whole kind of soy boy thing, blah blah blah. One observation I've made over the years, Natalie, is that the left actually has more of these. The left actually has more anti-vegan arguments than the right. Have you noticed this? So I was actually racking my brains recently to even think of a right-wing argument that's against veganism. And that was the only one that someone actually brought it to my attention. They said, yeah, George, you do make a point that there's more anti-vegan arguments on the left. But right-wingers do say all this crap like soy boy and all this kind of nonsense. But have you noticed that the left has a bunch of specifically leftist anti-vegan arguments, some of which you've covered in your videos?
I'm glad you brought this up. I don't want to go too much into the Ali Tabrizi thing, but I am making a video about him, and background for anyone. And I was messaging George about it, this argument he used. And you were like, oh, that's totally a left-wing argument. You can't try to paint him as right for that. But I actually found the opposite, because basically what he was saying is he's saying, oh, there's this single mother, and vegan activists are always saying, oh, just eat rice and beans, it's cheap. And that is something that leftists do with like food deserts and accessibility, right? But the way Ali was using it wasn't in the left-wing way. It was a different way to try to paint vegan as elitist cosmopolitans who are naive and don't understand the real world, in more of a right way. So I go into that a bit in the video.
Yeah, but I'd say it's the left who does that more. Oh, you're a bunch of white privileged, like cosmopolitan elitists. You don't understand the struggle of the people in the suburbs of Chicago and blah, blah, blah.
No. So in the US, there's a pretty big urban versus rural divide, where urban is more liberal, progressive, people live in cities, and the rural is, people in suburbs or actual rural areas, and they think of themselves as a lot more connected to the land and not reliant on different systems. Whereas the liberals are like, oh, you just go to Whole Foods and buy all your stuff. I think Joe Rogan mentioned that as well. So the urban rural divide is very real and politically divided in the US specifically.
From my experiences, though, anytime I've been called every time I've been called, for example, cis white male privilege of it. I mean, the right just don't say that. It's just leftist anti-vegans who say that. Colonizer, you're telling indigenous people what to eat and all this kind of stuff. Which is not, I don't even know what the fucking left is anymore, because isn't the left meant to be anti-tradition? You say, oh, we're the left, we're progressive, we're against trad lifers and all this. Talk to a leftist about veganism, they turn into the biggest fucking trad lifer in the world. You're destroying indigenous customs and traditions.
Yeah, I think that we could talk shit about hypocritical left wingers all day. I think what they're doing there is more trying to protect the indigenous people, and obviously I don't agree with how they're doing that, and I don't even think they really care about the indigenous people. They're just trying to get out of their own behavior. But I'm not sure if it's based in tradition or concern for the oppressed.
A leftist non-vegan virtue signaler? Well, I never thought that such people existed.
Who would know? Yeah.
No. Yeah, the Tabrizi vid. Now we're only going to touch very gently on this because you are doing this big kind of expose on him. Ali is someone I've considered a friend of sorts over the years. I mean, I've not hung around with him as such, but we've spoke on WhatsApp and stuff, and we have these, we've liked to talk to each other about philosophical issues and stuff. So I was I saw this and it was disturbing that he's put out this
Hmm.
vid. I'm very disappointed in him, and I made that comment known on his YouTube channel. So he's the director of Seaspiracy, which is a fantastic documentary, and I think has turned many people vegan. He's probably turned more people vegan than me, so I
Wow.
can't knock him for what. Well, I mean, he definitely has. He's produced Seaspiracy, right? It's a fucking Netflix documentary that millions of people have watched. So of course he's turned more people vegan than I have, in my opinion.
I
But
mean, I've never met someone who went vegan because of Seaspiracy. I'm not saying they don't exist, but we don't know, right?
yeah, good point. We don't have the data, but just crunching the numbers. I mean, I haven't put
Yeah.
no. My most viewed video on YouTube is 8,000 views, Natalie. So thank you for reminding me.
Ouch.
So, yeah. Whereas Ali, yeah, put it this way: nothing I put out on YouTube surely could be as effective as putting out a documentary that has been seen by potentially tens of millions of people with
Sure.
a ultimately vegan message. So I was obviously very disappointed by this. Can you briefly tell us then, yeah, how you felt when you saw this, when you came across that video of his? Give us just a quick summarization of what he said that is so stupid.
Totally. So I actually came across a Reddit post about it. I would have never found it before. I didn't even know who he was. I'd seen Seaspiracy and I was like, oh, yeah, it's a fine documentary, but he was never a prominent animal rights figure in my mind. But I think the thing that really bugs me the most about what he did is that he spent about 49 minutes just complaining about vegan activists and talking about how horrible
Mhm.
he was and this huge ego he had about it and just projecting all of that onto us. And I found it very disingenuous. And his arguments aren't very good. I'm sure a lot of people have pulled them apart already. And just being petty, Dandy's marshmallows are so good. And he's like insulting Dandy's. And that made me mad, but really just the whole ego about it. And I do think that he has shifted to the right, and I talk about that quite a lot in my video, so anyone can watch it there. But the one thing I did appreciate is that he still hasn't he hasn't eaten meat, he hasn't eaten eggs, just the honey bars. And I don't support honey, but I accidentally ate honey bars for about 3 years when I was vegan because I didn't know that Kind Bars has honey until I was traveling with a vegan at an airport, and they were like, "Oh, those have honey." And I was like, "Well, shit." So I accidentally did it for years. That's a lot different than doing it intentionally, and I do think it's stupid, but I'm still holding out hope that maybe he won't go full ex-vegan.
Well, there's the three reasons, folks, that Natalie is getting cancelled. So number one, she spoke on a podcast with me. Number two, she's pro-gun. And
Pro
number
gun.
three, she was eating honey bars for 3 years. I mean, fuck me, guys. If you listen to this and you
I know, I had no idea. God.
um um all right. So we were, as I say, we want the video to be a bit of a surprise. So we won't go too much into the Tabrizi stuff then. So let's go to I think this is probably the final point I wanted to talk to you about then actually. Um I did a live reaction to one of your videos last year, I think it was. You did a video critiquing a pretty great tool that I like to use, Sally. What was this all about? You did, name the
Oh,
trait doesn't
no.
work. Name the
Why I
trait.
hate Name the Trait is
Uh,
what it was called.
let's talk about that. Yeah. Was that clickbaity? Do you really hate name the trait?
Oh yeah, I hate Name the Trade. I really did not mean to trigger the vegan debate bro community quite as much as I
Well,
did with that title, but they were certainly triggered and let me know. And I started the video by saying I don't think vegans should never use Name the Trade. I think it has value, especially in philosophical conversations like happen on these YouTube debates. But I don't think it works in street outreach because of this and this and this and this. And people took that as you think that no one should ever use Name the Trade and you hate it and you're wrong and all this stuff. And I certainly think it does have a time and a place. However, I don't think that it's persuasive to most people, especially on the street. And I don't think that people are that great at running it unless they really have done it a lot before. I think it's harder to run than it looks. So a lot of times vegans end up doing a bad job and then it's even less persuasive. But my main problem with it is that the whole point of it is to highlight the difference between human and animals. And I think what we should be doing is highlighting the similarities because the similarities are what matters. And when people are looking for a justification for something in their head, they're going to find it. And you can try to logically debunk it and whatever. But I don't think humans are super logical or rational creatures. So I think it's better to just speak to the emotions, the emotional side of
okay,
it.
so that was maybe one part of your critique that I agreed with, that maybe it's not the best thing to deploy in street outreach and that it's probably not going to work for the average kind of just non philosophically minded person that you meet on the street. It's better to outreach in the way we're already doing it with like AV and We the Free and whoever we outreach with, right? These groups have good outreach protocols that do seem to work. We don't massively have a huge amount of data on it, but we know that people turn vegan from coming across Cubes of Truth and We the Free 3-minute movie challenges and stuff like that. We have testament to that by the fact that there's these people in those organizations. So it does work, whatever those groups are doing, because we know people who have said, I came across a Cube of Truth or whatever it was, and now I'm vegan as a result of that. Where I guess you might have reached the opposite conclusion or may have got the wrong end of the stick is I don't think Name the Trait does highlight it's not about looking for the differences. It shows why, if anything, it exposes that there are humans among us who have these traits. It shows how similar we are. It shows there are humans who can't talk. There are humans who can't build things. There are humans with the IQ of a chicken. There are humans who who might not understand death in the way the average person can, or value their life in the way the average person can. For me, Name the Trait is fantastic at actually showing the similarities. It's what Peter Singer called the argument for marginal cases. There are humans who have these things that people use as these shitty excuses to murder animals for.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's just a disagreement on practicality and, why are we taking people through this long philosophical exercise to maybe get them to see that there's no difference when we could just have them name similarities from the start, the ones that really matter. Like to me, that
Mm,
just seems a lot faster and more effective. But I do think that they'll leave the conversation trying to find more differences. And
mm.
it's hard to go through all of the differences and show that there are humans with those characteristics as well, just the amount of time it takes.
Do
But
you
yeah,
not?
humans are justification machines. Like whatever we want
Mm.
to justify, we will find a way to do it.
Yeah, you're right. And I think Melanie Joy talks about this a lot, doesn't she? She says, what is it? That our actions aren't formed by our beliefs. Our beliefs are informed by our actions. We believe the things we believe because we do the things we do rather than the other way around. Kind of weird. So
Yeah,
the
exactly.
the reason people support what's happening to the animals is because they are buying animal products rather than they are buying animal products because they believe the things they believe about animals. Kind of weird.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another huge point for system change because if we
Mm,
can make plant-based foods more the norm, then they won't buy into that human supremacy mindset as much. Like when I went vegan, I came across Earthling Ed and Dominion, but 6 months before that, I had really drastically reduced animal products because I saw game changers and learned about some of the health stuff. I don't think if I had done that, I would have been nearly as receptive to the animal rights arguments.
Do you not think, though, with Name the Trait, that it is just a fantastic tool for just exposing that the reasons people use to kill animals are just batshit insane? I mean, they're taking, there's no way, it's a brilliant question because the way it's devised is that there's no actual way to answer it consistently without sounding like a complete loon. It's like, yes,
Yeah.
I would Holocaust the mentally disabled or something, which people have
Well,
actually said online in debates. And it's just made, I think it's done our cause wonders, actually. I think it's been a brilliant tool when I've seen it online in debate circles.
I'm not sure. Maybe that is the case sometimes, but I think a lot of times it ends up making the vegans look crazy or silly. I can think of when Joey Carbstrong tried to use it against Tristan Tate, and he just kind of like sounded weird, and people weren't really picking up on it, and Tristan didn't care. So I think that sometimes it can make people look stupid, but we run the risk of making us look stupid, which does happen semi-high percentage of the time. So I feel like it's just not even worth the risk.
But why does it make, if they're the ones who are saying that yes, they would commit a mentally disabled Holocaust, why are we the ones that look stupid?
Yeah, because sometimes, so if people really know a lot about debates and like debates, they understand the value of hypotheticals and what they're meant to do. But I think the average person watching debates thinks that hypotheticals can be silly or come across as manipulative, and just someone bringing that up in the first place, they won't take as seriously.
Yeah, it's like this whole killing predators thing with the xenomorph, which also comes from that kind of Discord debate circle. Have you heard?
Right.
Have you heard the argument about the xenomorph?
Is that basically where if there were, yeah, xenomorphs who acted like predators, we would for sure kill them? So why aren't we killing lions?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
and yeah, and so I do understand what you mean because yeah, okay, while I don't think we should dodge hypotheticals, and I think hypotheticals have huge value. Yes, these things do kind of sound crazy to the average person. But
Hmm.
look, you don't have to run Name the Trait in a way that you could try, you could run it, but you could just not use these super insane hypotheticals. You could actually just try and make it as realistic as possible. Like I think in your video, you mentioned aliens or something.
Yeah.
Um, but you could just mention, if there was another race of humans that did this to us or something like that. You don't have to necessarily make it about um you don't have to make it about these weird like magical creatures or anything like that, is what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
yeah, but it's still a hypothetical, and it's still easy for people to dodge. And whenever I have been on the street and maybe use the Neanderthal example or
Mm.
different race of humans, I feel like people will just kind of become intellectually dishonest to win, and I think that that's a much bigger risk on the streets compared to
Mm.
on, like, a YouTube debate, because people can't dodge as much in that situation, whereas in the streets, they can just be as dishonest as they want. So that was an issue I ran into with it when I was trying to use it, and I've seen that happen to many people as well.
It wills hilarious results though in online debates. Did you see my
Yeah.
debate with did you see the one with the crazy guy with the ponytail that I had recently in the beard? Did you see that guy?
No, no, I didn't see him.
Okay, well, I'll have to send you that after the show, and maybe I'll put the link in the description so my viewers can see it. But I ran Name the Trait on that guy, and it was just it was pretty hilarious to be honest. And then I had another one recently as well with this South African dude, and I used it on him. But
Well,
yeah,
okay,
look,
one more problem I have with
go on.
Name the Trait is that no one wants to debate vegans anymore. Like, there aren't nearly as many vegan debates as there were kind of at the height of Name the Trait. And I think part of the reason is because we have a reputation for running Name the Trait and doing this argument that always makes people look stupid, and they just don't even want to engage. So I feel like it's hurt our reputation.
Yeah, well, there's ways that people engage in toxic behavior, though. I mean, Isaac and Avi, for example, fuck it, I'm going to name drop them. I mean, they behave in just shameful ways. We've seen how they treat other vegans, even, let alone not.
Yeah.
I mean, well, they treat non-vegans better than they treat vegans. So, I mean, that's one sort of problem is that it can be, yeah, it depends who's actually doing it. But I don't think I've used it ever on in a debate online in any kind of particularly like, snide way or way to kind of like shame someone. What I'm doing when I use it in a debate online is I'm just saying to the person, I'm trying to persuade you of this. I'm trying to persuade you that maybe there's an inconsistency in your values at the moment. And actually, if you take a trait equalized human with that, maybe you'd understand that this isn't the position you want to hold. So there's a nice way to run name the trait. You don't have to do it as
Yeah.
this like debate bro, as you call it. Ha ha ha! I'm gonna like wreck this dude or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, it's just unfortunate that kind of the people who spearheaded the name the trait debate format also ended up being so awful.
Mm. It is. It's a real shame, and I think that Isaac and Avi as well. They would have. It's such a shame that they such good intellectual capacity that they have. It's just wasted through that personality.
Well, I don't want to say much about them. I feel like it'd be mean.
Oh, you don't have to worry about that. But yeah, no, I know you're too classy about. I know you're too classy for that, Natalie. So you don't have to. But look, I think I've asked you everything that I've wanted to ask you, Natalie. So, um, I really appreciate you all the work that you're doing out there for animals, and yeah, all your activism and all your content that you're putting up, even if we disagree on a fair few things. But that's just going to happen in this movement anyway. So it was really good to have you on and had a really interesting chat with you about a lot of these things, and I think it's going to be really good for my listeners. So thanks so much for coming on, Natalie. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah. And if anyone wants to find out more, check out proanimal.org. If you're in the US, definitely get involved, especially in DC, Denver, or Portland, where we're launching campaigns in the next year. But otherwise, yeah, thanks so much for having me. And I hope I don't get canceled too hard for this one.